Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our June webinar. I'm real excited about this one. There's been a lot of work leading up to this, a lot of exciting discussions and research about this opportunity around what we call distributed district energy at Bunker Hill as one strategy to support the neighborhood scale decarbonization. And of course, the ultimate result depends on individual buildings and all of the work that you all are doing to enhance your efficiencies and drive down emissions and usage. But some pretty exciting findings coming out of this collaborative effort, and I'm really excited to share this with you today in advance of the release of our final report, which is in process coming out of this whole endeavor. My name is Dave Hodgins. I run the LA Better Buildings Challenge, and I'll be hosting today, starting with a little bit of housekeeping, and then we have some great speakers who are very involved in putting this whole thing together. So it'll be a fun conversation. I want to always thank our sponsor and funder, the LA Department of Water and Power. Been doing this work for over 10 years now, which is really exciting, and I'm really grateful for the continued partnership here. And they were also key in a lot of the great recommendations and discussion that happened as part of this effort. Lines will be muted. We will have time for Q&A. We hope that this is inspiring and brings up questions and ideas and opportunities to get involved. So there will be time for that. As always, we will send around the slides, the recording, some key takeaways, related resources by Friday, or on Friday, I should say. And we appreciate your feedback. So please do tell us how we did, and don't hesitate with the questions. So I will start with a little context. A lot of it's probably familiar, but this opportunity with the district energy strategy is an exciting one, a new one to me in terms of the depth that we went into with this. So Erin and Dan will get deep into that. I'll talk also about the recommendations that came out from the technical assistance panel, and I'll talk more about what that is for those who haven't heard that term before. And again, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So with that, why are we talking about this? And before I jump into that, I want to thank our partners at the Urban Land Institute, LA, and the Greenprint Foundation, Marty Borko, who's become a really good friend through this process. Not able to be on today because I think he's involved in another tap. They've been very busy, but ULI, for those of you that aren't members or are familiar with that organization, is a really amazing industry organization, and their mission is to nothing less than to shape the future of the built environment and transformative impact. And that's really inspiring, and it's been such a great collaboration with them. The TAP, or the Technical Assistance Panel process, is a well-established process within ULI. And it's a multi-month process, but basically involves a concept, generating a concept, creation of an expert panel, and I'll go more into the process, which ultimately culminates in a final report, which, as I mentioned, we are working on now. And the panel was in May, and it is just a amazing amount of generative conversations that happened over that 2-day period. So that report will be coming out very soon. And again, today is a preview of that. As I mentioned, it's a 2-day process. We were hosted at a beautiful space at Halo, provided by Brookfield, who were also great contributors to this whole discussion. We had a fantastic panel. I think I have a list of who all was involved on the next slide. We also did a tour. As you can see some photos there, we went around to the CenTrio district energy plant underneath Bunker Hill, as well as to some other key sites, nodes of connectivity there, and through some of the areas that are most underserved and that we think there's a huge opportunity to help through expansion of this infrastructure. And that's headed through Skid Row and other areas of downtown where you've got smaller, older buildings who may not have as clear of a pathway to decarbonization, not as if it's a simple thing for any of us. We also did a bunch of stakeholder interviews, broke into groups, and those included real estate professionals, attorneys, capital markets folks, policy people, other cities, other utilities that are further along, have dealt with different issues around this before. And all of that informed development of recommendations, which are summarized in the deck that we're going to talk through today and will be presented in a beautiful final form in the final report that is coming out soon. I won't read all of the names here because it's a long slide, but it was a fantastic group. As you can see, great representation from commercial real estate, from the policy world, from planning, from the city side, utilities, district energy, as well as engineering and construction. So it was a really fantastic group, and it was so fun. And I want to thank all of you again for making the time to do this in your busy schedules. So the key topics that we were digging into were really, how do we leverage existing infrastructure towards citywide decarbonization goals, right? How do we get bigger results faster? How do we get, the biggest potential synergies? And is there a there? We started with a hypothesis that this could be a really compelling strategy, but needed to really quantify the potential impacts. And so that's really what we got into. And as we dug into the Bunker Hill opportunity, realized that with CenTrio's experience in other markets, there's potential to connect the Bunker Hill plant to satellite plants throughout downtown. And so the vision grew to say, how can we help smaller buildings, as I mentioned, less well-resourced buildings, access district energy and access more cost-effective decarbonization opportunities. And so the idea really blossomed and kind of took flight during the TAP. Not to sound too highfalutin, but I'm pretty excited about it myself. And key to the effort also was to think about, not just what can we learn from other cities, but how can what we learn become helpful for other cities that have similar opportunities. So what is generalizable? What can be a roadmap? And so that's part of what we're thinking about in the final report too. So most of you are familiar, have heard about LA 100, but this is DWP's plan. It's actually a plan, not just a hypothetical exercise. Science-based plan to get to 100% clean energy. And there are pathways to get there by 2035, but that's really going to take, for that to be cost effective and for that to happen most effectively, it's going to start with efficient buildings and the types of creative collaborative opportunities that we started to dig into with this tab. In the LA 100 study, and this is probably, rings true for most of you, energy consumption, consumer demand is not going down. So if we're going to get there, we need to simultaneously become more efficient and also shift to cleaner sources of power. And, we've got extreme heat emerging as the #1 public health issue in LA, even past air quality, which we're so known for. And access to cooling has become a top social equity issue. And so all of these things are connected. And again, hence the reason to find these big opportunities. This graph comes from the Sustainable City Plan, and it just shows, the numbers vary in different markets, but it hovers around 40% in most urban areas. In LA, it's 43% of our emissions come from energy used in buildings. And that's not blaming buildings. That's just a fact. We spend 90% of our time indoors, right? Doing things that use energy. But the cool thing is that buildings are also a nexus to other decarbonization opportunities. And that's what I think was exciting about the work that Arup did, that Erin will be talking about, is uncovering some of those linkages, how freeing up electrical capacity in buildings enables electrification of other end uses like heating or transportation. So buildings really are the wedge. And as LA 100 talks about, that energy efficiency is the most cost-effective way to get there, and the fastest. Some of you may be aware there is a stakeholder process going on right now. This is past the theoretical stage. So putting a price on carbon in LA, those conversations are happening. So the Housing Department held a stakeholder engagement meeting last week. Building and Safety has been doing stakeholder engagement. CEMO is the new Climate Emergency Mobilization Office. They've conducted a whole series of stakeholder engagement meetings, really with a lens of equity and inclusivity, and making sure that there are opportunities to decarbonize that are accessible for everyone, not just the large buildings. But very important to pay attention to this and weigh in. You guys are the leaders. You guys know how to do this, what the barriers are, and please do let us know if you want to get involved here. But LA, this is moving ahead because it needs to. And LA is not alone. In fact, we are far from first in this area. New York, and you see across the country, even smaller cities, the ones that you might not have expected, like St. Louis, have building performance standards, which is another way of saying they've put a price on carbon. And that was a big part of what we heard in the panel, is that, in order for so many of these projects to pencil, we need to have a price on carbon and to have some certainty around when that's going to go into effect and how that's going to work. But again, this is not just an LA conversation that's happening nationally. So some of you may already be dealing with this in New York or San Francisco or DC or other markets. So circling back to ULI, and we're going to get into the meat of the discussion here very soon. We were one of 7 projects that were selected through a competitive process. It was global, and so it was very cool. We've gotten to sit in and hear about projects in other markets, including a couple in China, a couple in Canada and Europe, and several here in the US. And so really want to thank the Greenprint Foundation and ULI National for the generous support here and the grant that they provided to ULI LA to do this convening and to put this thing together. And we're really excited to collaborate on next steps now that we're getting into what we're calling the implementation stage when the final report comes out. So why Bunker Hill? I learned a little bit of a history lesson as we got into this. It's super interesting. That's a picture of Bunker Hill back when LA was a new city, and it was a residential area. In fact, the wealthiest community in LA, and a lot of these little Victorian houses, or several of them anyway, have been relocated now as Bunker Hill was redeveloped by the Community Redevelopment Agency in the 70s to a really commercial center that we recognize today. Then on the next slide, you see more of what it looks like today. The Grand Avenue project more recently brought the Walt Disney Concert Hall and the Broad, and now there are more exciting new projects delivering on the Hill with Related's new project going up. But now it's time for another change, another transformation as we look towards the future, future-proofing our buildings, and that's the decarbonization opportunity. So with that, I would like to introduce our speakers who are going to talk through some of the exciting work that they did in prep for the TAP and that came out of the TAP itself. So we've got with us today Erin McConahey. She's a principal at Arup, a global energy and engineering firm more broadly, and Dan Kelley. He's a senior vice president of U.S. West operations at CenTrio, who are the owners and operators of the Bunker Hill plant and a number of other assets around the country. So Dan, I think the next slide is with you. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you, David. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, I'll let the slide transition. So little bit on CenTrio first. So CenTrio is a sustainable energy services provider. We are the largest pure play district energy company in the United States. We have 13 plants or systems throughout the U.S., both heating and cooling, and that in metropolitan downtown areas like Bunker Hill and Los Angeles, but we also have higher education and healthcare campuses as well. We have 4 systems in the Los Angeles area, but this initiative is focused on Bunker Hill, which is our flagship plant. It's been there for a few decades. It's gone through several renovations. Most recently, over the last couple of years, we've invested in some new chillers and upgraded capacity. So you can see here from the slide, there is a total installed capacity of 12,500 tons. The current capacity you see here listed, that's what's allocated to our current contracted customers, and then we always keep 2,500 tons held in reserve. And as if we expand the system, connect new buildings, we'll always keep an N+1 redundancy or spare capacity to serve as backup. We have the ability to expand up to 20,000 tons within the footprint we have. And then, we do operate like a utility. We have pipes in the ground that bring that thermal energy to our customer buildings, and then we'll send monthly bills just like the utility. But then we're investor owned, and we use our own capital to make these connections and upgrade the systems. Speaking of resiliency and redundancy, so we do have 2 separate utility feeds coming in from LADWP from different switch yards. And then we have additional electrical resiliency inside the plant with our electrical distribution system. So, and we are considered critical infrastructure, so we do get a priority for return of service if one of the electric utility legs goes down. I think the only time we've had both go down was during the last earthquake back in the mid-90s. So, and we were one of the first facilities back up. So that is the highlight on the Bunker Hill plant that is part of this discussion.
So as part of the preparation for the TAP, we were able to do a thought exercise to look at what if we had sort of 18 buildings on Bunker Hill, including the ones that were already connected to the plant, total of almost 18 million square feet. What if those were all connected to the CenTrio plant? What would sort of the balance of benefit be to those owners to come onto the chill water system? So one of the things that we noted in doing the analysis, which was both a sort of kilowatt hour analysis as well as a peak kilowatt analysis, was that obviously moving kilowatt hours off of the individual customer property would help to, reduce their energy use on the property, but it would also reduce the peak kilowatts of active use on the property. The benefit of having that peak kilowatt deferred is that you could actually use that kilowattage for other purposes, whether it be to pick up EVs or to pick up electrification for heating. So what's shown on the screen right here is that if all of those 18 buildings were to offload their current chiller kilowatts and pump kilowatts to the CenTrio system, you can see that there would be almost 29 or 30 megawatts worth of peak electrical demand available in those buildings. And then if you look at the orange lines, that is the map of what the peak installed capacity would have to be associated with converting to heat pumps for heating. So an all-electric system off of that same amount of electrical capacity. And you might worry, oh, well, those orange lines are sort of shooting up over that 30 megawatt line. If we go to the next slide, what you can see is that actually those are very few proportion of the hours. And what we actually know is that most heating plants are oversized in Southern California by somewhere between 50% to 100%, just because of the allowances that Title 24 is historically given to design teams to intentionally oversize by at least 40% for ramp up in the morning. So with better controls and whatnot, it's very likely that the replacement heat pump capacity for heating is likely to be somewhere between 50% and 75% of what's there now. And so the peak kilowattage would accordingly be reduced. So we feel like, there's probably a way to kind of handle taking advantage of a chilled water based district cooling system to not only get efficiency on the cooling side, but also to get electrification. And so what would that look like for those 18 buildings? On the district utility side, certainly you have the 29 megawatts that's released for other usage. You have the savings at the buildings. The efficiency of the central plant is much higher because the CenTrio plant is able to run each of the chillers at maximal efficiency and optimization in conjunction with each other. So there's automatically an 18% more efficient delivery than you might have just running off of your own chiller plant. And so there's the equivalent of, 200 single family homes that comes from just that energy use in terms of carbon emissions. But if you look at what's the beneficial use of that 29 megawatts, well, if you put in high performance heat pumps at say 3.0 coefficient of performance, relatively standard, you have almost 11,000 metric tons of carbon emissions that's avoided, and that's avoided for the customers on their property, which is equivalent to almost 1,400 single family homes. And then if CenTrio over time were able, certainly they're connected to LADWP by 2035, the plant became carbon neutral or there were other renewables that were available, there would be even more carbon emissions that were avoided for equivalent to another 1,000 more homes, right? So by taking this almost 17.5 million square feet, putting it onto district chill water, using that peak electrical capacity to create electric, but high efficient electric heating on the property, we could basically avoid emissions for almost 2,400 single family homes. So it's quite remarkable how you could use just a single service district utility plant in order to accomplish these much larger decarbonization goals. And the interesting thing is we all know that the decarbonization challenge is always heating throughout California, even though we're in a quite temperate climate. Right? Even for offices, what UCLA's Energy Atlas says is that almost 38% of our energy use in a given year for offices comes from gas, and it's 62% for multifamily. So definitely taking, sort of our gas-based appliances and getting them onto our all clean renewable electricity system within 12 years' time is a key goal.
And Erin, I just wanted to interject in case we've got people trying to, run numbers in their heads. Just that we had to pull the 18 buildings were from either buildings that CenTrio is in conversations with, or buildings about which we know something through our work with them in LABBC. And so, this was a great first cut, and I think it's a really interesting, shot at the order of magnitude of the potential here. But we really hope that coming out of this and going forward, more buildings will reach out and share with us some information that will help really refine this model and tune it to the building level. So we had to make some assumptions about plant efficiencies and so forth to do this. So I just want to make sure that people understand, we're not presenting this as a, as if we had all of the data that would have been perfect given the timeline that we were on to produce this.
So again, this is just kind of a snapshot of the potential, right? Where if we understand about controlling the amount of capacity that's provided by LADWP to the property line, take advantage of energy efficiency or offloading of peak capacity onto the district energy, that allows us enough headroom in order to accommodate the increased demand that comes from electrification.
And so this slide, I wanted to let Dan and Erin both comment on this one, but this came out of the panel's discussion about, balancing the technical feasibility, about some of the business priorities of needing, appropriate anchors, proximity to utility infrastructure, but also this equity lens that's really important for the city, for ULI, for all of us. And how can we bring district energy closer to more people, right? And more disadvantaged communities. And so this map shows a potential expansion path that would bring service into Skid Row. You see that highlighted there. But Dan, I wonder if you could just talk about this and some of the experience in Chicago or any other markets that speaks to the kind of potential to do this kind of thing.
Sure. Before I jump into Chicago, one thing I wanted to point out on this slide is we're able to leverage some existing infrastructure as well. There is a large central plant at the convention center. The LA County has a plant up at the Civic Center. And if we're able to, interconnect those guys as satellite plants or in that distributed district energy model, as you mentioned, David, that's a start. And then as we're able to work with developers and follow where redevelopment is happening, we can work with those building owners, build a new location, Little Tokyo, the Fashion District, Arts District, or in some cases, if there's a large enough plant at one of those current buildings, we'll come in and whether we'll purchase it or work out some type of agreement where it becomes a satellite plant within the network, contributes to the network, as well as that building would then gain the benefits of being connected to the district system as well, take advantage of those efficiencies that Erin talked about, or our resiliency and backup to their system, but then they still have on-site assets as well. I think that's going to be of interest to a lot of people. And then as we build out this larger system, like we did in Chicago, we're up to 6 plants now. So it started out with 1 plant, a district in the downtown, off of Wacker in Chicago, and then we built a second plant and interconnected the 2. And like I said, now we're up to 6 plants. We've just put one across the river, so we drilled underneath the river, connected to the old post office, picked up their plant. Now we're doing a western expansion. So when you get into this distributed district energy model, it really, you're able to leverage the system and reach out to other communities. And that's how you get to the multifamily affordable housing areas. That infrastructure, the main infrastructure is already there. We can take the return leg from our system and then expand out into these other communities, smaller single family homes or small low-rise buildings, and provide an affordable package. Now, CenTrio, and there's others that can do this as well. I'm sure people can do it on their own, but one of the things we want to do as a sustainable energy provider is provide a solution to not only the high-rise buildings that could connect to our system through the satellite location, if whether it could be demoing their plant, or like I said, acquiring their plant, or even building renovations in order for their building to connect to the district system, and add that electrified heating component. CenTrio, we have a technical engineering team. We can work with companies like Arup to develop a solution there and implement it, provide the capital, the financing, and turnkey execution. And then that could be carried to the multifamily affordable areas as well. So we could provide a solution, we could provide financing, work with the city, any of those agencies to help get this done.
That's great. And I think we'll come to it when we get to the recommendations, but I thought another exciting idea that came out of the panel was the idea, to your point about leveraging redevelopment opportunities, is the fact that the city and Metro and other public agencies own a number of development sites scattered throughout downtown. And so a quick pathway to help promote the expansion of the system is to leverage those redevelopment sites, particularly, as well as public buildings. So really a lot of thought went into that relatively simple looking graphic we were just looking at. And then this wanted to hand it back to Erin to talk a little bit or underline some of the points Dan made about the opportunity here, because this was a big insight that you had during the panel.
Yeah, so one of the things that we were trying to look at is, once you sort of created what people called the necklace of district plans that were surrounding the Skid Row area in particular, from an equity point of view, we tried to think about, what would those affordable housing and really any small business or multifamily owner would be facing, right? That when they're confronted with the idea of electrification, they're quite concerned about the cost of the utility electrical infrastructure, the backbone infrastructure, that they would have to get a new service from the city in order to add either condensing units or other types of cooling, heating units, heat pumps onto their facilities. But what if actually we were able to take that warmer chill water line, as Dan was talking about, and take that through these other locations, whereby they could basically take out furnaces and install small water source heat pumps that could just be put in a closet or into a ceiling over a bathroom or something like that. And what you actually get from that is we can basically just weave the pipes through, at the small sort of apartment level scale. These remain on 120 volt power that might be already available there. And then what you get is you actually get cooling in addition to sort of the furnace heating that was always required by code, which will also improve cooling equity in these neighborhoods. And then what all that does is it dumps all of that extra heat during the summertime into the chill water system, brings the chill water back to the plant at a higher temperature, which then improves efficiency at the plant, actually. And so everybody benefits from an efficiency point of view by having this sort of stepped cascading use of the chilled water for these secondary purposes that have sort of a public health, public policy benefit in terms of supporting electrification of some of the other types of buildings that we already knew from previous analysis with the city might struggle financially in order to do the electrification exercise over the next 10 years.
That's right. And that's, come up a lot as we switch to, barriers. That's okay. Next slide, please. Is, how do we do an equitable energy transition, an inclusive energy transition? And so that was a huge, aha for me, is the synergy that could exist here. But, so this is all very compelling, but this, a lot of barriers. And we spent a lot of time also, talking about these. Inertia is a big one, right? This is big, and that has a lot of implications with it. But, one we talked a lot about was, operational control and getting people over the hump of, connecting to a district system, freeing up that electrical capacity to electrify heating. But I think we are, at that point, as we talked a lot also about the lack of carbon pricing. I think the same folks who are, really working hard to decarbonize are also, I'm hearing, these are partners we work with and folks on the line today, at this point where it's like, now it's time to start operationalizing these big picture goals, because 2035 is really not not far away. So I hope that this final report and this conversation is going to help move some of this. Regulatory uncertainty, I spoke about, barriers to customer power generation. It's not that it isn't allowed, but there's potential for more, right? There's potential for more, and some of the buildings that we looked at would love to scale up, but the utility rates and incentive structures need to now catch up, and DWP is working hard on that. But it is a complicated undertaking. Utility rates are extremely complex. But again, DWP, as LA 100 lays out, and the board has resolved, and staff are working very hard to make this work, right? They're very serious about those targets. And all of this depends, it helps to have examples, right? Case studies, what's worked. And so again, that's why we're excited to bring forward the Chicago examples, and Toronto, and Copenhagen, Denmark, and other examples that show what is possible there. Coordination, right? When we looked at the necklace diagram, imagine, the departments that would be involved at the city level, as well as all of the private sector stakeholders. And so I'll get into the recommendations. Smaller buildings, how are they going to do this? Great idea. How is that going to happen? And then capital. Dan spoke about CenTrio's ability to bring capital, but this is a huge undertaking. And as we look to move, quickly and at scale, are there opportunities? And some of the panelists are public-private, partnership experts, public finance experts that brought forward some cool ideas there as well. So with that, I'll go quickly through some of the recommendations that came out of the panel. The first I touched on, again, back to the necklace diagram, the city and other public agencies own land. And most of that slated for development of affordable multifamily housing, which is in such short supply. And so a rapid way I learned to put this into practice would be to include a requirement to connect to or create district infrastructure as part of those proposals to develop those sites. And I think that's a really exciting conversation to have, as code continues to ratchet up and we look at net zero new construction. Our hypothesis, and this has been confirmed, in the research we've been doing, is that there are avoided costs of construction if you can connect to district infrastructure for your cooling, and potentially, if there's critical mass, even for heating, and that can bring down the cost of construction and open up opportunity for deeper affordability, more density, both of which are things that we very, very much need. So I think this strategy is one that could be very powerful from the policy perspective and could really help open things up. Again, the necklace, but Dan spoke about the resilience of the Bunker Hill plant, the fact they've got 2 separate feeds from separate substations, it's critical infrastructure. He also talked about siting plants, and these existing plants, are strategically located. But when thinking about new ones, right, to bear in mind proximity to utility infrastructure, and to really understand DWP's plans to maintain and upgrade the infrastructure, so that we're really working together. And this I think speaks to the coordination piece as well. I put this slide here again intentionally because this was really the big insight here, was this synergy between cooling of our large office buildings and other commercial facilities that can really anchor the district system initially, and make use of the chilled water and help the economics of this whole thing work in order to deliver service to multifamily affordable and others who have less capital, less ability to pay, and reduce some of the subsidy that might be needed to make sure that happens. again, as part of this equitable energy transition. So look more at this. And when I talk about our next steps, I'm really excited. We're proposing, pursuing a grant from the state to drill deeper on this, because we think there's real potential here and we want to study it further. Carbon pricing, I talked about this already, but the why, you know, retrofits are complex and they take place over multiple years, and without a price on carbon, certain types of projects are just hard to get funded. And if we want to have the type of broad participation we need, there needs to be a clear policy, and that's going to help with planning investments, drive the business case for decarb today. You know, if we look to New York as a bit of a time warp, we see some really big projects starting to happen there, in large part because they do have a building performance standard in place that has teeth, serious, you know, non-compliance penalties, clear timelines. So I think, you know, we can look to that and other markets. And again, this is in development now, and so that was kind of a confirmation, I think, from the panel that the city is headed in a good direction, but you know, want to make sure that that the policy is you know, is really well thought through and considers all of these important elements. We also talked about gas, and you know, there's a big focus on, you know, decarbonization broadly, that some people take that to mean cut off gas tomorrow. What the panel's opinion was on this theme, I think it's this theme of leveraging infrastructure and trying to go further faster, is that you know, with the advances on green hydrogen and the fact that, you know, not all buildings are ready to electrify, the grid's not able to absorb all of that right away, that definitely to have a plan, a clear plan to phase out and decarbonize gas over time, think about ways to leverage infrastructure. We talked about fuel cells, combined heat and power, very efficient uses of gas, and to create power at the building level or at the district level, and the potential to convert to green hydrogen as that becomes more available. So that was a very interesting discussion. And somewhat related to the prior slide, we'll stay on this one. In New York, you know, in their building performance standard took a very strong stance on the gas piece, and so certain buildings that had combined heat and power systems were penalized heavily. And that was seen as an unforeseen sort of negative outcome of that well-intentioned policy element. So the panel thought it was important for the city to consider that here. Utility rates and incentives were also discussed. And of course, DWP is working on this now. And rolling out new programs that are incentivizing fuel switching, decarbonization, incorporation of more efficiency. But, you know, again, it is complicated. Efficiency, it was, you know, relatively simple. We want to see energy use, you know, going down or flat. As you start adding electrification of different end uses, you've got electric use going up, right? And so how to measure and incentivize is a complicated undertaking. There was discussion around collaborating with customers. Some of the stakeholders we spoke with have been looking at batteries and thermal storage, making ice, and just the way that the current rates are structured, the economics just aren't there. And again, you know, the current rates don't reflect, right, the cutting edge, right, the state of the art necessarily, because that doesn't change as quickly as, you know, our building stock is becoming more efficient. LA, you know, you guys are kicking butt, #1 Energy Star city forever. So so this is an important part to help support this whole thing, and then the capital can flow. Talked about this one too. You know, DWP does have the largest feed-in tariff program, solar incentives in the whole country. And so it's not as if there isn't opportunity there, but there are, it was discussed in the panel, opportunities to connect offsite renewable energy generation. But to get an interconnection agreement that works for everybody is not a something that's happened with a lot of frequency yet here. And also the point, as Erin considered in their analysis, what if the district energy plant could operate on 100% clean power? And so while DWP is making huge investments and sticking to their commitments, if we've got buildings that want to move faster, owners that want to move faster than what the utility can provide, how can we do that? How can we do that in a way that really works for everybody? Because there is shared goals here, right? We're trying to decarbonize. I think there's an objective to leverage private investment, that this shouldn't be all on the back of the ratepayers as a municipally owned utility, right? But how to do that? How to do that is a question. A case study. This was recently in a lot of the news that I read, but Brookfield has a project in New York City and Manhattan. It's about 8 million square foot development, 100% powered by clean hydro that their sister company built, owns, and operates. And they were able to, after a lot of negotiation, strike an agreement with the utility there, Con Ed, where they could share the transmission and distribution and other costs that the utility needs to account for and cover, and made the economics also work for Brookfield for that project. So again, looking at the time warp of New York, 4 hours earlier or later than us, examples that we can learn from. This is not a simple thing. We talked a lot about smaller buildings, but also for larger buildings, and everybody's so busy. So how do we get to a quick, analysis of what's involved? What is the rough order of magnitude, ROM, cost and investment? A lot of this is work that we try to do, at LABBC, but we are, a small team. Working, and DWP also tries to help with this, and other program implementers, but we heard a need in the panel for more of this, right? And more resources and toolkits to help customers and their service providers do more of this independently, but also, that there's a gap there where there's a need for more technical assistance, more resources to help folks do this. Looking at the expansion of the district energy system, of course, this involves working underground and streets. Dan mentioned in Chicago, tunneling under a river. When you're working in an urban area, especially downtown as busy as downtown LA or Chicago, there's a lot of coordination there. And so we think there is the political will, right? But we've got a lot of parties acting, a lot of folks trying to work, and so there's a need for collaboration and to prepare for federal and other dollars, but coordinating. And this is at least a good start at a list of the entities that would ideally be coordinated to support expansion of the system. And then there was more talk specifically about support for small buildings and abilities to streamline process there. And again, this is something DWP is really working hard on. They've been hiring, developing new groups, restructuring. So it's exciting to see the progress there. And again, the TAP is confirming that that's definitely needed, and beefing up the customer support and education. And then lastly, the capital piece. So we looked at the panel recommendations about creating a municipal utility district or a community facilities district. These are entities that enable public financing of infrastructure like this, maybe even building level upgrades. Now there's process with that. That doesn't happen overnight. Of course, the cost of capital could be very low, but then there was interest from some of the commercial real estate folks and CenTrio saying, we have capital, we're ready to move quickly. And so, what is the opportunity there to balance that? I think there's also philanthropic dollars and other capital providers that are really interested in this. And so that's really what a green bank is set up to do, is to coordinate, support investment from public, private, and philanthropic sources, and to help absorb some of the upfront cost, project origination, bringing that expertise and coordination part. So all of these ideas emerged as important, but back to the theme of coordination, this is complicated, so this needs to be someone's job working on this. So with that, we got about 8 minutes left in case anyone has any questions. I know we really covered a lot, and I hope that this has got the wheels turning for folks. So Bethany, if you can read any questions that come in, that would be great.
Sure. I think, one question was, as far as an ideal customer, what is an ideal customer to join this kind of system? What kind of building does that look like? How would implementation play?
Dan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's an ideal building. We can make it work for basically every building. There may be some uniqueness or customization that's needed. Obviously it would take more capital to address some of that, but we've been able to connect a wide range of buildings, commercial, residential to retail. So we've been able to make it work. And the reason why is, when you're attached to a district system, there's a diversity of loads. So we do have residential, we do have hotels, we do have commercial. So we're able to, that's why we're able to operate in that efficient range 24/7, if we have those differentiations of load. So, with a walkthrough, and, I think that's part of the toolkit that we talked about, David, is a screening tool or something that would allow these property owners to take their energy bills, plug it in there and say, yeah, the district system would save you the 18% that we're talking about. Unless the building is just recently renovated, all new air handlers, already very efficient chiller plant on site, there would still be an advantage because now you're connected to the district system and you have that added resiliency. But so I would say the one that would probably drop to the bottom of the list is someone that just spent all that money and renovated all their property, all their infrastructure.
Right. So maybe on the opposite end, it's if a building, has existing infrastructure that's at or close to or past the end of its useful life, and they're looking at, multiple 7 figures, outlay.
That's an ideal candidate. Yeah, that would be ideal. That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Erin, I wonder if you could take that one as it relates to the, smaller buildings and multifamily. If there's a quote, ideal type of candidate.
No, I think one of the things that we would have to navigate in terms of education with those types of landlords is the introduction to the idea of being associated with a district central plan, right? Most of those properties are, smaller owner entities, unless they're part of a larger consortium, and operate independently in order to divest themselves, of properties at will. So I think versus the commercial sector, which tend to hold and just transfer ownership to the, kind of to the next corporate owner and whatnot. So I think it would have to be sort of a conversation in terms of how they saw the value for operations for the period of time that they're under covenant in terms of affordable housing. But then, kind of what is their flexibility to kind of move on if they needed to divest themselves of the property.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that's come up in conversations I've been having as we start to socialize this idea and prepare for this, the next deeper dive. I was meeting with an owner of a portfolio in Skid Row, and none of their units have cooling currently. And so, going to heat pumps instead of the radiant, heat units they've got, would be a huge change just in the quality, the thermal comfort for the residents there. And so, and then, they're planning to move forward with a bunch of capital upgrades anyway. And so, in preparation for eventual connection to the district plant, those types of retrofits still can make sense today, right? Awesome. But I see, oh, here's a question.
I can read that out loud for you, Dave, if you'd like.
Yeah, I can actually see it. So a little bit more about the process, Erin. I think you touched on it, but more for the multifamily owner. Or maybe this is for Dan. Do they pay for the construction to tie into the district system? And then is there a service fee associated after we're tied into the system? And I think this speaks to the efficiencies that could be achieved here. So great clarifying question.
Yeah, I mean, we've done it both ways, where the building owner or property manager wanted to pay for their portion of the capital. And then after that, it just becomes, there is a service fee that is associated with, the monthly upkeep and maintaining that efficiency and reliability. So that's funding future investments and upgrades so that we're able to, maintain or achieve those contractual obligations. And then there's the consumption of the chilled water or energy itself. If CenTrio were to finance the connection costs, bringing the pipe to the facility, at times we'll handle the demolition of the existing plant as well, and then adding the heat exchangers and the pumps and the things they need to interconnect to our system into that former mechanical space. So we can finance all of that, and then that would be factored into that capital recovery, would be factored into that monthly service fee. Mm-hmm. But we would spread it out over the life of that agreement, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it might be.
Right.
And we found that our access to capital, we were able to get capital pretty at a low rate, and we're very competitive.
Right. Right, because as we had in the slide, is you've got a similar investor base to utilities, long, stable cash flows, so good access to cheap debt financing. And this was another area where we talked about, the potential for some public financing to subsidize as well. Again, not that you guys don't have great access to capital, but in the interest of taking that off of the tab, if you will, of the affordable multifamily owner, having them owe that back, is that a cost that the city could absorb, that the public could vote to absorb potentially? There's a question that's come up about how can contractors, private sector consultants participate in this kind of thing? And absolutely, there's no exclusivity here at all. This is a concept, and so it's going to be individual owners and their teams connecting to this. So I think this is, hopefully a great opportunity for everybody, including all of the folks that are helping to build these projects, in addition to the infrastructure.
Yeah, and David, I'll just point out, on top of the partners, whether it be engineering, contractors, whoever we would need to execute some of these projects or the initiatives, but then when it comes to the financing piece, we always look for equity partners as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think we'll squeeze in one more question, because I'm really excited about all the multifamily questions we're getting here. And I'm not, well, we could probably answer this one. What would be the minimum number of units that would be feasible for a multifamily building to participate? Again, we're kind of looking in the downtown area at this point. So I'm going to assume that these buildings are of a certain size, but is there a technical, what's the smallest building you guys have ever done, Dan?
a great question. I mean, we have all the way down to, 20,000 square foot retail space connected to an existing system. So, it would all depend on, from that main return line where we've already extracted a good amount of the energy, how far away from that return line is this multifamily affordable housing? Is it a mile down the street or is it on the next corner? So that plays into it a lot. And then, if we see an opportunity, if it is a good distance away, but we see an opportunity to connect other buildings along the way, when we put that pipe in, we'll size it in anticipation of trying to pick up additional buildings. So we'll take on some risk there, but I guess, there's, again, not an easy answer as far as what how small it can be. It all comes down to how far away is it from the system, or what's the capital required to connect them.
Right. Yep, and hence the idea of trying to bring the infrastructure closer to the smaller buildings to make that more cost effective.
Exactly. Yeah.
We had another question here about whether there's a need for property or business level project financing under this plan, and I think CenTrio does offer financing, but to the previous question about how can private sector providers participate in this, I think it's open. What we're trying to do here is create the environment where lots of different deals can happen. So I see that we are at time, so I just want to just conclude here. Thank you all for the great questions. We will be reachable afterwards, of course, circulating all of there's a survey that just went out through the chat, circulating the slides, the recording on Friday. And on the next slide, I just want to reiterate our next steps from this, which are, as we said, meeting with you all and really getting into it, getting more real data to feed into this model and continue to flesh out, again, create the environment where lots of projects can happen, meeting with our partners at the city and the utilities to present all this information as we synthesize it into the final report. And as I mentioned, I'm excited about the opportunity. We're pursuing several grants, but working with the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office to dig deeper into this. I'm really excited about the synergy with multifamily and appreciate all of the questions there. So with that, we will conclude today, and thank you all again for your interest. Thank you, Dan and Erin, for making the time, and we look forward to all of the follow-up from this. Very excited. Have a great afternoon, everybody.